In this lesson, I'm going to demonstrate some of the additional if statements. We did work with the standard if and else statement here. I'm going to add and incorporate some of the additional if statements, such as the elif. So typically, we've been working with the if-else statement in Python. This statement is an extension to the Python if statement. And we've already seen that the if statement will only execute the statements when the given condition is true, and if the condition is false, it will not execute the statements. In the real world, however, it would be nice to execute something when the condition fails. Here's once again the syntax for the if-else statement. So first, we specify a test condition, and if this condition is true, then the following statements will be executed. In other words, all the true statements. Else, if the condition is false, then these statements will be executed. That is, the false statements. Here's an example, a simple example of the if-else statement. So here, in this example, the variable is marks, and we use the integer and input function to prompt the user to enter the subject marks. And if the marks are greater than or equal to 50, Python is going to give the output, congratulations, you cleared the subject. Else, Python is going to say, you failed, better luck next time. Let's quickly do this before I demonstrate the elif. So let's click on File, New File, and this brings up our editor. So here, I'm quickly going to say marks equals integer. Of course, you can use float. For example, the marks could be in decimals as opposed to just being integers. So in fact, let me use float. So it'll be float, input, and then set of parentheses, and I'm going to prompt the user to say, please enter your marks. Keeping things simple here. A couple of parentheses. Let me increase the size of this window. Great. And next, I'm going to use my simple if statements. So if marks greater than or equal to 50 here, colon, that's the syntax. Python automatically indents it. And I'm simply going to give a couple of print statements here. So print, congrats, and then another print statement. I'm going to say you passed. Great. Else, what Python should do is print. In other words, if the marks are not greater than or equal to 50, Python is going to say, you failed, better luck next time. And a couple of statements simply, better luck next time. Great. And the S1, S2 here that you see are simply statement 1, statement 2. These are just comments, right? So you can also type your comments here as well if need be. But here's my simple if. Let's see what happens when I run this. So click on Run, Run Module, click OK to save. And let's navigate to our Documents folder within our Windows Explorer under Data Files and Python. I'm going to say my if statement. That's the name of the module. Click Save. And Python prompts me for the marks. So if there are 77, enter, congrats, you passed. If I run again, the same module, please enter your marks. I'm going to say 45. You failed, better luck next time. So a simple if statement that Python executes that we just wrote quickly. Let me minimize this. Okay, great. So here's our editor. I'm going to minimize our editor. And again, we've done this before. We've used the if-else statement, and I'm sure you've practiced so that it's easier and easier as you move forward. Now here's something new, the elif statement. So this is another feature of the if command, is the elif statement. In other words, this statement stands for else if, and implies that if the original if statement is false, but the elif part is true, then simply do the elif part. If neither the if or elif expressions are true, then do what is in the else block. Okay, so this adds to the if statement. Here's an example of the elif statement. So here we have our name, which is simply an input, your name. And then we use our if statement. If your name is Brian, it's going to print that is a nice name. Elif name equals John Hamilton, it's going to print John Hamilton. In fact, it's going to print some text in this particular example. Elif equals Michael Palin, then it's going to print some text. And then if neither of these conditions are true, it's going to print the else block, which says you have a nice name. Let me in fact demonstrate this. Let me bring up our editor here one more time. Move this here so we can see. Let's click on File, New File. I'm going to close the previous one. Let me resize so we can see. Great. There we go. So I'm going to write a small program. In fact, let me start off with a comment here. So enter your name. And then I'm going to define, of course, a variable first here. Name equals, I'm going to use input and simply say your name. Next, I'm going to use the if statement, right? So if name equals, and recall, you have to use double equals, right? Because Python knows that now you would like to find out what this name equals to. So I'm going to say name equals, I'm going to say Brian. And since I'm using an if statement, I'm going to use a colon, enter. And then, of course, I'm going to do my print. And I'm going to say that is a nice name. Close my parentheses. Here I'm going to use elif, right? So instead of using else, I'm going to use elif because it's going to check to see whether any of these conditions are true before it executes the else block, which I'm going to do it later. So here I'm going to say elif. In other words, check another name equals, and let's see, let's say John Hamilton. That's the one we used earlier. And then, of course, a colon again. And this time I'm going to tell Python to print I am a soccer player. Close the parentheses. Next, I'm going to use elif one more time, or you can use it as many times as you like. And I'm going to say elif name equals Michael. Use my colon. See how Python automatically indents it as you're writing code? Let's say you were building a list of these names and you want to check every single time whether this name is entered correctly or not. And whenever the user enters the correct name, Python would give the output. So in this instance, I'm going to say I am a rugby player. And next, I can use the else statement. So if none of these conditions that I just coded are true, then Python is going to use the else. And what's it going to do is going to print, you have a nice name. Okay, so here's what's happening. First, you define a variable, ask for the input, your name. If you enter Brian, Python is going to say that's a nice name. If you enter John Hamilton, Python is going to say I'm a soccer player. If you enter Michael Palin, Python is going to say I'm a rugby player. If none of these conditions are true, Python is going to say you have a nice name. Let's try it out. Let's click on Run. Run module. Click OK to save. And Python brings up the Windows Explorer. Within my Python folder, I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to call this module my if statement. Click Save. and Python prompts for a input, your name. So let's say, for example, if I were to enter something like Brian, Python is going to say, that's a nice name. If I run this again, and again, I can quickly run this. The shortcut is using your F5 key on your keyboard, right? So you don't have to click on run every single time and run the module. You can simply choose the F5 key. Okay, so that's a quicker way to keep testing your module. So here, once again, I'm going to say my name is, now what happens, let's see if I say Brian. Obviously, that is the name that I typed earlier. Nothing wrong with the spelling. The only difference is that instead of a capital B here, I'm using a lowercase b. And Python is not going to recognize this because you've specified in the code that Brian has to be with a capital letter B. So here, even if I enter the lowercase b, hit enter, Python is going to say, you have a nice name. It's not going to say that is a nice name. Python is only going to say that is a nice name if you enter the correct word. Otherwise, it's going to say you have a nice name. And where is this coming from? This is coming from the else block right here. So if none of these statements are true, Python is going to say you have a nice name, and that's exactly what Python does here, because Brian, even though it's spelled correctly, you've started off with the lowercase b. So I wanted to point this out. You need to be careful. Okay. Similarly, if I run this again, your name, if I use Michael's name here, hit enter, it says I'm a rugby player, and that's exactly what it says here as an output. So this way you can use the elif statements within your code. So practice using the if, else, and the elif statements. Let's move to our next lesson.